former chair of the Defence Select Committee. Very good morning to you, Tobias.
Good morning to you.
Now, I'm sorry to point this out, but it appears that you're not wearing a poppy, so I presume there's a reason for that.
Only because it's on my jacket. I'm about to leave from here as soon as this, and I have to put on my coat.
Okay.
But I assure you, and I can confirm that I attended the Remembrance Sunday in Bournemouth. Was very proud to do so. Was actually amazed at the turnout in Bournemouth, which was quite incredible. And I think very, very poignant. Not just to say thank you to those who have served and those who continue to serve and watch our backs, keep our country safe at night, but also because of the very stuff that we're going to be talking about, I'm sure, the storms of war are threatening again. And it's very, very poignant that as we say thank you to a previous generation, we simply don't know. There's a certain amount of uncertainty that we face today.
Indeed, yeah. And the only reason I ask, Tobias, is because we've been talking about it all morning, that there was a piece at the weekend in the Telegraph, and knowing your history with the armed forces, I would have been surprised if you weren't wearing one for a particular reason. But it seems as though an awful lot of young people, Generation Z in particular, as we call them, Generation Z if you like, have said, you know, they don't feel comfortable wearing a poppy. They feel as though it represents something that they don't want to be associated with. In other words, they say it represents to them far-right politics. It represents to them Brexit. It represents to them racism. It represents to them, you know, things that they don't want to be seen to be sort of supporting, which is really terribly sad, I think.
I would agree, and you touched on it in your introduction. It is perhaps a failure of education to explain the history of the poppy, how it came about. This was actually an American where it started in America, where they started to wear the poppies as a symbol of the blood from McRae's poem. Very, very moving indeed. In Flanders Fields where those poppies grow. And from there it grew. It came across actually indeed, I think, to France first of all, then to Britain as that symbol. The Royal British Legion then took it upon themselves to use it as their official symbol. And every time you buy a poppy, and we all end up buying actually more than one because they blow away and so forth, quite rightly, that money goes to the Royal British Legion to help service personnel, veterans and so forth, make the transition outside of the armed forces, but also support those families who have lost loved ones as well. And the Royal British Legion also disperses the money further to much smaller service-facing charities as well. So I think part of Remembrance Sunday is actually what it says on the tin, is to remember, but then allow a new generation to appreciate that enormous sacrifice that was given, not just once, but twice, but also those other wars as well, in defending our standards and values. And it's those very standards and values that are being threatened once again today as our world deteriorates and the threat picture grows. Our world becomes more dangerous, not less.
Well, I mean, I suppose that remains to be seen. The world has been pretty dangerous for the most recent times, has it not? I mean, Donald Trump's election, I presume is what you're referring to. Donald Trump, when he was in charge, there was no war in Ukraine. There was no war in the Middle East as such. So, I mean, it may well be...
You misunderstand me.
It may well be... Well, let me just finish. It may well be that things improve once he gets in.
No, there's no way that's going to happen. That's, I mean, to ignore...
Why don't you think that will happen?
Well, let me finish. Firstly, because of where China wants to take the world. They have a very different geopolitical outlook. They are rewriting our international rules-based order, and then they're recruiting other countries as well. So our world is splintering into two spheres of huge influence. You have the West, and then you have China, Russia, and Iran. And with those, you have the global South, many countries now waiting to see which way things will go. And what they're seeing is perhaps a complacent West, a reticent West, a risk-averse West, unwilling to perhaps confirm and support those very values that we stood for in the Second World War, and then the international global order that we created in the aftermath of the Second World War. That is the bigger picture of threat that I'm referring to. The fact that Donald Trump has got elected, firstly, make it very clear, the Americans have spoken, and we've got to come to terms with that. That is, that is for them to determine. But sure. They are.
But I mean, the situation you described, Tobias, has been the case for quite some time. I mean, Russia has been in an alliance with China and with North Korea and Iran for quite some time. We've also seen China kind of build its empire, if you like, through Africa and into South America now for over a decade. I mean, this has been going on for a while.
Yes, but if it's going on for a while, and every year our world is getting more dangerous, not less, then there comes a point when there's a 1930s feel to our world, and there are some big questions as to whether or not we are actually prepared for what's coming over the hill. And I can say very firmly that we are not. We need to spend more money on defense. We need to move to 3%. That's the one thing Donald Trump said the last time he was actually in office. And unfortunately, not much has changed. And that's why there's a frustration from the Trump transition team to say, absolutely, we want to work with Europe, and they are our closest security ally, and we should listen to that. And in all of NATO should now be moving to that 3% target because of where our world is going. It is that hesitance, and it goes to Afghanistan, it goes to the mess of Iraq, but it also goes to the fact after 3 years, we've not been able to put out that fire in Ukraine. And what message does that send to our adversaries, our competitors around the world, that we're not willing to stand up and defend democracy the world over? And that takes us to a very, very dangerous place. It's fine when there's no adversaries. But like we say, when we got the power bases such as China, that in our lifetimes will challenge America economically, militarily, and technologically for their seniority, then we're in a difficult place.
We are, and I agree with you. But Labour apparently are yet to commit to building not only the 2.5%, forget about the 3%. I mean, they're not even sure that they're going to stick to the 2.5. I mean, we saw Darren Jones at the weekend being interviewed, and he was very, very kind of, shall we say, weak on what defence money was going to be made available. It was almost as though defence is just another part of the budget.
I think that the MOD and indeed the Defence Secretary John Healey gets it. The area that doesn't get it is actually the Treasury. Yeah. And we found this when we were in government as well. But also, I don't think that the British people also are facing the pressure that they would do if they fully appreciated where our world is going. There's no pressure at the moment, even during the last general election, if you remember. How much did the security situation, despite the growing war in the Middle East, despite what's going on in Eastern Europe, despite the issues of the geopolitical threat from China, did we discuss international matters? But half of our GDP is affected by international headwinds. So when something happens in the other side of the world, there's a rippling effect that impacts on our economy, on our prosperity, which is why this symbiotic relationship between our security and our economy is so critical in today's day and age. Britain is more globally exposed, arguably, than many other countries. When something happens...
Sorry, I was just going to say, I mean, it's no accident that people said when Iran decided to attack Israel with drones and missile strikes that if they had done the same thing to Britain, we would not have been able to defend ourselves in the way that Israel were able to, because we don't have, the Iron Dome. We don't have, the various different defence systems that they've got to protect themselves in Israel. And even with those defence systems, they still had to take a few hits. We couldn't do that. If Iran decided to attack us, we're sitting ducks, aren't we?
So, two reflections on that. There again is a direct illustration that 10 years ago there wasn't this potential threat from drones and long-range missiles because the threat picture was very, very different. It has changed. We need to invest more in our defense, including protecting the British Isles. But also there's another question there, a tactical question. If we can defend Israel's skies from drones and missiles, as we did last April, why can't we do the same in protecting Ukraine's skies from the very same threat, even the very same drones as well? And that's a hesitance on the part of NATO and the West to not support Ukraine. And Putin picks this up. He recognizes how timid we've become, not being able to look him in the eye and stand up to him. And that's the sort of statecraft that we need to rekindle. And I hope that's exactly where we'll go. Now we have a new American president coming into the White House.
It may well be that he takes a different view, but certainly the noises coming out of what would be the new Trump White House are that he does not see any point in prolonging the war by continuing to supply weapons and money to Vladimir Zelensky. That might turn out not to be quite the way he does it, but at the moment it seems as though he's reflecting a very, prevalent attitude in the West, certainly in America, and in some people here that I speak to who say, how much longer are we supposed to prolong the war for? Why should we continue to supply money and weapons just to stand still?
Yeah, and that question absolutely needs to be answered, and the answer is very straightforward, that if you don't stop Russia where they are now, they will move on and take more of Eastern Europe. That is Putin's plan. His hero is Stalin, and he's now more powerful than any other European leader, and that's where he will go. And that's where we need to explain to the American president the consequences of not putting this far out, or somehow doing a deal with President Putin, because the precedent then that sets as to where things may go in the future. Also, abandoning a European democracy in this way, in this hour of need, isn't what Britain actually does. So we need to recognize and work with the American president. Let's also acknowledge that what gets said on the campaign trail doesn't necessarily resonate when you're actually in office.
But would but Tobias, would you not welcome an end to this war, though? Would you not welcome, because people say inevitably all wars end with some kind of negotiation. Would it not be more sensible to end the war in some way, shape or form, so that people weren't being killed, so that money wasn't continually being spent? Because, you know, the stalemate now is not really going anywhere for anybody, is it?
You're correct on that. And whose fault is that? We are still arguing today about what weapon systems we should be sliding across the table to Ukraine. So ATACMS, Storm Shadows, Taurus missiles, being able to fire those at range. We're still hesitant to do that, again, because we're spooked by Putin's rhetoric. We've lost that Cold War statecraft that we had, built to stand up to our adversaries. And we need to ensure that we can actually do that. Otherwise, I'm afraid it's Munich all over again. You say, what are the consequences of just striking the deal there? It's because that's exactly what Putin wants us to do. It wants us to actually give up, sign a deal, and then 2 years later, he's regrouped, rearmed, and then he advances all again. Let's learn the lessons of the lead up to the Second World War, because I'm afraid, and I can't put it any plainer than that, our world is getting more dangerous, not less. There is no deal to be struck with Putin at the moment, because ideologically, he's at war with the West, not with Ukraine. He's at war with Britain as well. You know, the coercion, the cyber attacks we have every day, even assassinations on British territory. And we still are in denial that Russia is at war with the West.
Well, then maybe we have to respond in a bigger way, and maybe that's for another conversation. Tobias, thanks for talking to us. Tobias Ellwood, former chair of the Defence Select Committee.